That's Classic. We bring you great laughs and a unique behind-the-scenes look at classic television shows and movies. I'm John Cato. I'm an actor, voiceover artist, and also bring you an amazing insight as a moderator with over 20 years experience in the television industry. All right, so fantastic. Today on That's Classic, we have none other than Judy Norton, which most of you will be familiar as Mary Ellen from the Waltons, as well as many other appearances she's made on television and various theater productions. So we're just thrilled to have her on the show. So Judy, thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you got it, without a doubt. So anyway, I kind of want to go through certainly the Waltons and certainly, you know, other aspects of your career. But why don't we just start, first of all, with, I kind of read a lot on, about you, and I noticed that you started out really as a dancer and then kind of segued in as a child into acting. What was that? What was it about it that you kind of felt like that urge to go into acting versus dancing?
Well, I started the dance classes when I was very young. I think like a lot of little girls, some, ballet classes and tap and jazz and stuff. And I think what made me steer away from the dance was that I was one of the younger ones. So when it came time for recitals, I didn't get to really be featured at all. And I'm not sure what that was about because I was young.
Yeah.
All I thought was, I didn't get picked to do the lead. It very well may have been that my parents couldn't afford whatever was involved in the recitals, costumes, and things like that. But all I knew was I wasn't picked. And around the same time, my father was working with someone whose children were doing some work in film and television, background work, whatever. And he thought, oh, well, my kids could do that. So he
Yeah.
sort of started looking into that. And for me and my sister, he got us a sort of a drama coach. So I started doing some of that and felt that it interested me. So it just sort of segued. It wasn't necessarily a real conscious choice,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I had the drive and passion for dance that I probably would have needed to really pursue it when I've worked with a lot of fabulous dancers in musicals
hmm
and they just live and breathe dancing, and that was not me. So
I got you. It
probably
was nice.
good that I transitioned young.
Yeah, it was nice that your dad kind of recognized that too. That's pretty cool. So I saw that you also had worked in the Jonathan Daly theatrical company. Was that around that same time? Because I mean, for fans out there, obviously Petticoat Junction, Jonathan Daly, and I think you did like even CPO Sharkey. Come to think of it, but was that all at that time as well?
That actually came about later. I was about 10 and I had an audition for a theatrical production of Wait Until Dark. There's a
hmm
little girl in that theatrical production. And I went and I auditioned for that and I didn't get that production, but somehow Jonathan knew of it or heard about it and he was doing a production also, and so he offered me the role in his production. So I initially joined that production, and then after that, Jonathan had an ongoing repertory theater
hmm
company,
hmm
and he also wrote plays specifically for the people that were in his company. So I basically was invited. My sister and I were both sort of invited to be part of that company. We were the only non-adults in the company.
Yeah.
My sister was involved in a few productions, but she moved out of it. But I really loved it, and so I was the only child in that company, and I was with them till I was 13 and started doing the Waltons, and I couldn't handle both
Yeah, that's a
responsibilities with
lot.
my shooting schedule. I couldn't be reliable for classes. But Jonathan would have classes when we weren't doing a show, and then when he would put a show together, then he would use that show to create characters for the actors to help them move their skills forward.
Wow.
And we got to put it up in front of an audience, which was wonderful. And I started doing behind the scenes stuff as well. I might handle props or help
hmm
with various
hmm
different things because everybody sort of pitched in that way.
How did I thought this was really interesting. I talked to a lot of different actors or child actors and how they got their start and things like that. I found it really interesting that you end up in Hotel, the film Hotel. I mean, that's quite a cast, like quite a cast. Carl Malden, Merle Oberon, Melvin Douglas, uh, and then I saw the scene. I mean, so you're in the elevator. Granted, you don't say anything, but look who you are with. Did you at that time, which often is hard for a kid, but did you realize like who you were around at all? Did anyone even tell you?
My mom was aware of who I was around because I remember walking across the sound stage the first day of filming, and she's like, "Ooh, there's Merle Oberon." I had no idea who Merle Oberon was
A
at that
legend.
point in my
Yeah.
career, and I did not have the scene that I did, the sequence. I mean, we spent several days shooting that elevator sequence. Because in film, in television, that would have been like, a quarter of a day to get, you
Right.
would have had bam, it's done.
Yeah.
In a film, we did multiple days on that. And Merle Oberon was not in that scene.
Hmm.
So I didn't interact with her at all. But yes, in the elevator was Michael Rennie and Carl Malden and and then Rod Taylor rescued everybody out of the elevator. So he
Right.
was the one who lifted me up out of the elevator. What I do remember, I mean, I had no idea who these people were,
Yeah.
uh, but I remember Michael Rennie playing Old Maid with me, playing cards with me, which I
That's pretty
just,
cool.
looking back, think, wow, how sweet was that for this fabulous older actor to sit and take the time to play cards with a kid on the set.
Right. I saw one other thing I saw in there too, which I wasn't as familiar with the actress. I don't want to overstate it, but I had read up that Dee Paul was in the elevator with you, and then later on is in actually the Waltons all these years later. Do you recall that?
Yes, it was Dee Carroll, and she
Dee
played my
Carroll, Dee
mom
Carroll, Dee
in the
Paul. Yeah.
hotel in the film Hotel,
Yeah.
and then she played the character Dr. Vance in the Waltons, who sort of was my mentor when I wanted to become a nurse. Uh, she played his wife in an episode, so I did know that we had worked together before, and I thought that was a wonderful coincidence because there weren't many people that I had worked with because I didn't have a real extensive career before the Waltons, so
Right.
I wasn't constantly coming across people I'd worked with before. But later on, I would cross paths with people, and it's horrible, but I've forgotten more people than I remember that did episodes because everybody did an episode of the Waltons.
Oh yeah, I was
It
gonna
was
say you're
amazing.
human. Come on.
Yeah.
I totally get it. What about so how many TV roles did you actually have then before you booked the Waltons?
I had done sporadic things. I mean, I started off doing background work, as a lot of children do,
Yeah.
and then, um, and then I started getting some, small roles in TV shows. I did something in Tammy Grimes had a short-lived
Hmm.
television
Hmm.
series, so I did an episode of that, and I did an episode of a show called Felony Squad. Where I really had a prominent role. James Best played my father in
Oh
that,
wow. Wow.
and that starred um, Dennis Cole,
Oh
and
geez.
I, th- oh gosh, I'm totally spaced on the other
Okay, it's pretty
actor.
impressive on those, both of those.
Well, I had a crush on Dennis Cole because he was so cute, and again, I was like 9 or something, but it was like here's this blonde-haired, blue-eyed,
Oh yeah. Yeah, no,
And I
he had the look.
remember him. I remember him giving me this one acting tip, and of course, anything that he said, I was like, "Oh yes." He said, "When you're doing a close-up, have your eyes go back and forth because like as you're looking at the person, because it keeps your eyes active, and it probably would make me look demented if I tried to do it." But
Right.
it's like, "Oh, there's a good tip." Um, so that was a lot of fun. That episode, and then oh gosh, what else did I work on? It's a blur.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
But yeah,
sure.
he had various different things, and then of course worked with the theater company.
Hmm.
Um,
Did you do commercials as well?
Only in background work. Like my very
Hmm.
first job was a Hostess Twinkie commercial, but there was no dialogue in the commercial,
Hmm.
although I was sort of featured because we were at Griffith Park on the merry-go-round. There's a there. I don't know if it's still there, but there was a merry-go-round there,
Hmm.
and So they wanted a number of children riding this merry-go-round. And then at one point, the director wanted like two children to run past cameras, which made you much more featured because you were
Yeah.
just in. And I was one of the children that he chose. And I just remember being upset because I didn't get to keep riding the merry-go-round
Yeah, right, of
at
course.
that age.
Having
It's
no
like I was all
idea.
about the fun. Never mind, I'm going to be featured.
Right.
I did a Colgate toothpaste commercial again as background, but the lead featured actress, and that was Kim Carath
Oh,
from
wow.
Sound of Music.
Yeah, no
Uh,
kidding.
so I did little odds and ends of things like that. But I didn't really do. I've never really particularly done commercials.
Uh-huh.
Uh, for whatever reason, it's not a prejudice on my part,
No.
just not my strong suit. Uh,
Uh-huh.
being cast in commercials. So
So what I'm sure you've been asked this a zillion times, but and forgive me for asking you again, probably, but when you first auditioned for the Waltons, do you recall that? Do you remember
oh yeah,
like the call and the process? And could you go walk us through that a little bit? I think the
absolutely.
fans would love that.
Yeah, it was it the initial audition. I went in, and because we auditioned with the scene in the barn when we were cracking walnuts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Early in the episode, we're sitting around cracking walnuts, and Mary Ellen is having a rant,
Mhm.
as she often does.
Yeah.
Uh, so it was a wonderful opportunity for me because I was really featured in that scene. What they did, which they don't typically do, is they had, I know for sure they brought in six actors, one for each of the younger children. The role of John Boy, which Richard Thomas played, I'm sure was already cast at the point that we
Hmm.
auditioned.
Hmm.
So I don't remember if they had somebody who was reading John Boy or whether I can't imagine that they brought in actors for that. So they took in, I don't know how random it was, but okay, good, you six are coming in. And the
Hmm.
six of us went in and we read that scene together. And then and the producer Bob Jacks was there, Fielder Cook, the director, Earl Hamner, the writer and
Wow.
creator of the show, Pam Palafroni, who was the casting director. I think there was an associate producer. Anyway, so there was about 5 or 6 people in the room, and we read that scene, and then we went away. Then I got a call back. I went back, and again, they took 6 of us in the room, and we read that same scene. And thank you very much. Bye bye. I do remember because she was supposed to be a tomboy, and I was totally into all kinds of sports and stuff when
Yeah, very athletic.
loved,
Yeah.
loved doing all that kind of stuff. So my take on the character, I went in wearing cutoff shorts, a t-shirt, hair and pigtails, and barefoot.
Wow.
And I remember reading an article with Earl Hamner years later, and he commented that when I walked in the room, he went, "Oh, that's her."
Wow.
So something about my look, my presence. I was one of the few that didn't have red hair. A lot of the kids were
Hmm.
natural redheads, and we were all supposed to be redheads, so they were willing to overlook that, thank goodness.
Yeah, no
Uh,
kidding.
then what happened was I got called back a third time, and they brought 6 of us in the room, and there were only 6 of us there. And they basically brought us in the room. I think they wanted to see us all together. And they told us in the room that we were the ones they wanted to hire. And
Oh
that
my
never
gosh.
happens. You never get told in the room that you're hired.
Mm-mm.
And I
How
remember
exciting
talking
was that?
with Cami Kotler, the youngest. She was only like 6. And I remember talking to her mother years later. She had watched, because I did on my YouTube channel where I talk about the Waltons,
Right.
I did one and I talked about the casting of The Homecoming. And Barbara wrote me an email afterwards and she said, "Yeah, Cammie had told me that, but she was only 6, so I didn't quite know whether or not whether she had correctly understood that."
Yeah.
And of course, nobody was in the room but us. So for Cammie to go out and tell her mom what happened, Barbara was like, okay, maybe that happened, maybe
Right.
it didn't.
Right.
So
Exactly. You're
she's
sick.
like, "I was really happy to hear your take on it because what Cammie told me was correct."
Wow. Wow. Was that literally did everybody just pretty much like jaws drop at that moment?
I do not remember my reaction other than I was happy, but I don't remember any. I think you're so sort of, the room can be intimidating,
Oh, sure.
even as an adult, but as a kid, it was, going in for auditions was really intimidating. So I think it was kind of, oh, I can't go, yo, yay!
Right, right, exactly. Even though you're
It's like
feeling it,
game
you can't.
game
Yeah,
face on, oh wow, smiles and stuff. But I
right.
don't know that anybody. I think we were all a little stunned and maybe not quite trusting it until
Sure.
we got the official word. It's like this could be taken away, so
Yeah.
I don't want to count on it.
Right.
Yeah,
Until you're on the set filming it, you don't
got the
believe it.
contract,
I
got the,
get it.
yeah, right, checks in the
Yeah.
mail.
Yeah. So that was the movie, The Homecoming, right? That was
Yeah.
the initial movie. So in the movie, we have Patricia Neal, we have Edgar Bergen, which is pretty wild, actually, that he turned out to be the grandpa. Do you recall them? Do you remember what it was like
Yeah.
to be around them? Because obviously these are legends as well.
Yeah. Uh, because we spent 5 weeks filming together for the
Mhm.
homecoming, even though Edgar Bergen and Patricia Neal and not so much Andrew Duggan, because he was only there for a couple days because his part was much shorter, but
Mhm.
Patricia Neal was there throughout. Edgar Bergen was there throughout. So I do really remember them. Patricia Neal was um, I mean, she was wonderful. She was very professional. I don't think we really hung out and chatted.
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
Plus the fact that when we weren't on set, we had to go to school,
Oh,
so
right.
we weren't really we didn't really get to just hang out on set. But I had, I had a couple scenes with her, and that was really nice. What I remember is that we had all, our parents who were very familiar with Patricia Neal and knew that she'd had a stroke and had
Right.
recovered, we were sort of all cautioned to not be too rambunctious around her. Don't knock her over.
Oh, wow.
um,
Wow.
because I think nobody was quite sure just how steady she might be, if she had any physical, um, you know, aspects, anything going on there that might make her
Yeah.
not totally steady. So we were kind of like, okay, you kids, there's six of you, don't get out of hand. Uh, and so I remember being a little like keeping an eye, okay, I need to, maybe watching her a little bit differently than I would if I hadn't been thinking, oh, is she okay? Is she,
Good point.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
What about
but
Edgar
yeah,
Bergen? I mean, honestly, I do a lot of research in Hollywood and things like that. He's a real difficult one to really know much about, to be honest with you. Do you have any recollection at all of what he was like on
um,
that set?
yeah. One of the, not so much on set, although, when we were doing group scenes, it was all very easy and comfortable. I don't remember anybody ever having an attitude or
Hmm.
anything uncomfortable or any tension. I never noticed anything like
Yeah,
that when we
yeah.
were filming. It all just seemed like super warm, and the director Fielder Cook was lovely. So he really created a very warm, safe environment where we got the work done, but nobody ever yelled, and so
Hmm. Hmm.
there was none of that harshness on the set, which I really appreciate. Um, the two things that stand out for me about Edgar Bergen are, there was a scene when we're all sitting listening to the radio, and there's a knock at the door, and we all think it's our dad home. And so we get up and we all go running out of the room, and you see this point where Edgar's in his rocking chair, and it's like the chair goes like this. We literally knocked him over leaving, and they left that in. They left that take in where he's like,
Oh, that's
you didn't actually
wild.
see the chair fall, but it was not meant to happen. So that was one of those. I mean, fortunately, he was fine. He wasn't hurt, but I guess
Oh,
it was
that's
so
funny.
realistic that they kept that take.
I'm going back just to see that scene. Seriously, that's funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I remember that, and then I remember we had 4 weeks in LA filming at the studio at CBS Studio Center,
Oh,
uh, and then we went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming for a week to film all of the exteriors of the house and all the snow and everything that happened outside, we
That
shot
was
up there.
Jackson Hole. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. That was one of the
Yeah.
things I was so curious about. Did you ever go to Virginia? And so
No.
they went to Jackson Hole to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the Grand Teton Mountains, that was our backdrop for the homecoming. So everything, all that snow stuff in our show was all legit. It was up there in the snow.
Wow.
Uh, and while we were up there, we stayed at the Virginia Inn, I think, the Virginian Inn or something like that. And it was like a kind of like a motel. So it was kind of in a big U shape with a courtyard. And then there was a lodge, sort of there was a room in the reception area where there was this lodge and this fireplace and a big room. And Edgar had brought two of his ventriloquist dummies.
Oh, I was
Charlie
hoping
and
you were going to
Mortimer.
say that. Who were the
And
two?
he put on a show for all the kids that were up there.
No way.
Yes. So he did a show for us, just impromptu, one day at the hotel.
Was one of them Charlie McCarthy with the little
Yeah.
top hat and the
Yeah.
monocle? Oh
Yes.
my gosh,
And
that's
then
so
Mortimer,
cool.
the goofy one.
Right, yeah, I couldn't, yeah, I can picture him, but
Yeah.
I couldn't think of who
Yeah.
what his name
And I
was. Yeah.
remember thinking, I can see his lips moving.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's a little bit older at that point too. Yeah.
Yeah. But it
That's
was so clever. But he could do that thing where there was the illusion of him throwing his voice, which I was
wow.
fascinated by. And just the material was so cute and clever. And I just, even then, remember thinking how kind and generous that was for him to do that for us.
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
Plus, what a rare moment. Are you kidding me? I mean, how many people would have loved to have experienced
Private
that?
show. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty darn cool. So when you think about the Waltons, I mean, I've heard so many different stories. One was, I heard that you had a crush on Richard Thomas at one
Oh, of
point. Is
course.
that
During
true?
the homecoming. Yeah, huge crush.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Did you
I
know
was
who he
13, he was
was?
20. No, I knew nothing about him.
Wow.
And when I first met him, I wasn't, I was kind of, it took me a little bit at first. I didn't gravitate to him immediately. But it was pretty quick, at first.
Yeah, you both have a
Yeah.
pretty strong theatrical background too. I think that was even at that point you would have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously his was much more extensive than mine, and he'd already had a couple of hit movies, and so
Yeah, well,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. Uh, but just because we had so much interaction, our two
Mhm.
characters, Mary Ellen and John Boy, always had a really cool dynamic
Right.
throughout the time. So I loved the scenes we got to do together over the years because there was always this back and forth bantering kind of stuff. Uh, so he was great to play scenes off of, and uh, so I just, yeah, I mean, still a dear, dear friend. I still adore him.
Was there a similar, I mean, look, I'm not saying exactly, but was there a similar kind of between the three of you, kind of a similar uh, vibe offset? Did you kind of rib each other or what was that like?
Not really. No. I mean that kind of bickering thing. The bickering thing was on camera, but we would tease each other.
Uh-huh.
So, uh, but it was never, it was never a dig. It was more
Yeah.
lighthearted, fun teasing
Right.
than the way Mary Ellen and John Boy would get snarky with each other.
Right.
And because we sat next to each other at the dinner table, we would goof around.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're waiting for lighting, you're waiting for everything,
Yeah.
at that moment. What
Yeah.
obviously you're a big family in the show and all that. Offset, was there still that sense of like family? Like I've talked to, oh, I don't know, the people from Happy Days, various shows. And for some of them it was, and for others, not so much. What was yours like?
Ours, totally, totally. I mean, still, they're still family. I mean, I talk to them regularly. And
Wow.
we do things together. We take trips together. We've attended each other's weddings and births and bar mitzvahs and funerals, and
Yeah.
We've, yeah, we just like hanging out together. I mean, that is, I mean, the kids particularly. When I talk about the kids, I exclude Richard just because he was the star of the show and he
I
was
get it.
not. He was already kind of out of school. He was never in the schoolroom with us. So the kids were from Jason down to Elizabeth.
Hmm.
Uh, we totally hung out together. We went to lunch together every day when we were on the set. We would all just, wherever we were going, we'd all go have lunch together. We did different sorts of events away from the show because we did parades and appearances and different things like that. And then it just kind of continued. Michael and Ralph, I got close to more after the show was over, just because of the age difference.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not that I wasn't close to him then, but we didn't hang out unless we were doing something that was a public appearance that we were all at. Um, and Ellen Corby sometimes would do appearances with us, and I was I spent more time probably talking with her because she sort of took me under her wing. Some of us, a number of us, she did, and she would uh, give us advice about the industry and stuff.
Well, she was
Uh,
a she was somebody that she came from the right spot. I mean, Ellen Corby. I mean, I'm sure you know more about her than I do, but I mean, she literally went back to the R Gang comedies when it came to
as a script
writing. And
supervisor,
yeah,
she
exactly.
started there.
So
Yeah, so
she's
she, yeah,
yeah, and what was it? She had, I think it was best supporting, or I think it was best supporting actress Oscar nomination for I Remember Mama. So I mean,
she's a legend.
she's
Yeah,
a somebody to have, around. Boy.
yeah. And Will Geer, who, had an
Oh,
amazing background. I didn't spend as much time one on one talking with him, but he gave us all a lot of advice too, especially from his experience having been blacklisted.
oh, I
Um,
didn't know that Will Gear
yeah,
was blacklisted.
yeah. So during that time when he couldn't work, he had the theater, the Will Geer Theater that he
Yeah,
created in Topanga Canyon, which is still,
Botanicum. I think it was called like
yeah, the
Theatrical
Theatricum
Botanicum.
Botanicum.
Yes, I
Yeah,
remember that.
and it's still running. His daughters, grandkids run it.
Wow.
It's a fabulous theater.
Did you ever perform there actually?
I did not on their main stage. I did a concert on one of their smaller Under the Oaks
Hmm.
stages.
Hmm. Beautiful setting.
Yeah, and then we did a I think a fundraiser or something there. I mean, these were the concert and that were years later where we just
Hmm.
did some things to try and help out the theater. I attended some performances there, but
Wow.
uh, I never really learned to do Shakespeare. I didn't really do Shakespeare, and they predominantly would do. I mean, not just Shakespeare. They do other kind of
No, I
plays.
know. I know they did quite a few productions of it though.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I was a little
Yeah.
intimidated to step into that
I understand. I
arena. It's
understand.
like I did a lot of theater, but I gravitated more towards then musical theater after the Waltons and
Right.
did
Shakespeare's a
stuff
whole
like that.
nother animal. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh,
What about with Ellen Corby? So what was she like a very warm person offset, or I mean, she was pretty tough woman in the industry actually.
yeah. I mean, she could be. She could be very funny. She had this. I, you rarely got to hear Grandma giggle, but she just had the cutest giggle. If you on YouTube there is a clip of an appearance she did on the Johnny Carson show, where
Okay.
she tells a wonderful story about being off traveling someplace exotic and an interchange with an exchange with a taxi driver that's just adorable. But so you hear her actually kind of be lighthearted and giggling and stuff. There was that side to her, but she took the work very seriously. She really did her homework, which you can
Mhm.
tell when her performances are just brilliant.
Oh,
Uh,
incredible.
and so she really knew her craft and she was very professional and she was always kind of trying to get the kids to be more professional because it would get the hours
Your
would get
kids.
long and
Yeah.
it would just we were trying to keep our energy up so we'd get to fooling around, particularly if we were in the kitchen waiting. They'd want us to sit at the table while they set the lights, but then they'd want us to be quiet. And it's
Oh,
like,
geez.
but then it would be like, okay, good, now we're filming. Now you get to try and be energetic, and it's hot in there, and there's no air, and you're like, so we'd always digress into getting silly and
Oh,
making it
certainly.
difficult for them to set the lights, and Yeah, I know it was tough, but it was, come roll camera time, then it's like we needed to kind of be on. So some directors understood that and sort of let us roll,
Mhm.
and some cinematographers were more forgiving than others. Some assistant directors were more forgiving,
Yeah,
but we got yelled at a lot.
right.
So Ellen was always kind of trying to run herd on us, um, and sometimes it was successful, sometimes it wasn't. But
I got you.
she took things to heart. She took them very seriously.
Mhm.
Um, and she traveled a lot. As she'd done a lot of travel, and she had a fascinating life,
Yeah.
uh, and because she had been a script supervisor, her attention to detail was meticulous.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
sure.
so she would share things about that, and there's a real art to kind of walking and chewing gum, in
Yes.
terms of being an actor, because you have marks to hit, you have which are critical for lights and cameras and focus, and then you might have props and doing the same thing whether you're in a long shot or a close up. So keeping all of that straight while you're then also doing a performance,
Right.
uh, just being aware of all those things, just you kind of had to do this kind of thing all the
Right. At the
time.
same time.
And
Was the set from the Homecoming, was that the same set that was used for the series?
no, um, none of it was, because we did our interiors at different studios. We
Okay, I got
shot
you.
it at CBS Studio City for the
Hmm.
Homecoming, and we shot at Warner Brothers for the Waltons. So the
Yeah.
interior of the house looked different, the kitchen looked different. It was all the the way they built it was a different configuration. And then in the Homecoming, the exterior of the house, which we really didn't particularly see, we saw it off in the distance in the
Yes.
opening credits as we were trudging up to the house with our logs in our hands. But then you never really saw the exterior of the house again. In the Waltons, that exterior set was on the back lot of Warner Brothers, and it was just kind of a facade and sides, but there was almost nothing inside it, so we couldn't shoot anything inside.
Wow,
It
it
had
must look really
platforms so you
nice.
could go up to the second level and look out the windows, and because sometimes you'd see John Boy or somebody lean out a window from the front yard, or so those types of things, but inside there wasn't much of anything.
Gotcha. Did and then of course you got Ralph Waite and Michael Leonard. Obviously they're your parents in the show, but what were they like off, once the cameras weren't rolling? Did they do their own thing, or what was your relationship with them?
Yeah, they tended to. They were incredibly close, and Ralph would Ralph would be a bad influence sometimes. Like in the kitchen, he would help us. He would help us be silly. He would. I think he was also kind of helping keep the energy up and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But he would
yeah.
tell us off-color jokes
Oh, nice. Nice.
and sing intentionally out of tune,
Oh, funny.
loudly. Uh, and we would always joke about his, he had very blue eyes, his baby blues, He would
Yeah.
tell, oh, how the baby blues look. Um, but he could be, he had a certain work thing that he wanted to have, and sometimes for his focus, he didn't want anybody that didn't absolutely have to be in his sight line there. So sometimes, if for whatever reason he didn't feel locked in, he might suddenly go, "Get all those people out of there," you know,
Wow.
because it was distracting enough to him that he felt it was compromising his performance. So I think sometimes in the way that you'll see athletes, tennis players, like
Hmm.
kind of blow up or whatever for a moment, whether it's to spur their energy or what it is, he could have a volatility about him that I think was part of his process, but it was never directed at us. It was
Sure,
never
sure.
mean. It was just be like, oh, okay, Ralph's hit a point where, okay, everybody.
Right, right. You knew what he was doing.
Oh yeah, but to
Yeah.
work with him and to do scenes with him, I mean, he was so brilliant. Him and Michael. I mean, as I've been looking back at episodes and just watching their work, it's just so good. And
Oh, yeah.
Michael was incredibly she has such a big heart, and she feels everything so strongly that it was always like, how's Michael today? She
Yeah.
was so sensitive. Um, and she was going through difficult times. Um, she was going through a divorce right at the beginning of the series and
Oh,
trying to raise three boys on her own, and all the responsibility and the hours of doing this series. So I
that's a
think she was
lot.
frequently torn between loving the work and wanting to be there for the work, but not being home for her kids. And so I think there were some really difficult times for her. So, she would get emotional at times, and,
Hmm. Hmm.
everybody would try to be there to support her, but she could also she could get giddy. Like the kitchen table was our bad spot. Because sometimes
Right.
with all that fooling around, then we'd get to giggling. And most of us could kind of shut it off. And sometimes Michael couldn't shut it off.
Oh
So
my
we'd go to
gosh.
roll, and she'd be like giggling. And Mary McDonough, who played Erin, she said she sat next to her at times, and when we'd like be holding hands for grace, she said she could feel Michael's shoulder shaking or her hand
Oh,
shaking.
that's
Like,
funny.
yeah. So sometimes we just have to keep, keep multiple takes to try and get through something because she just keep breaking up.
Oh
Um,
wow. How long were your shoot days, by the way?
well, they were minimum of 12 hours, I would say,
Okay.
pretty much. Uh, Not for when the children were underage, up until we were 18, we could only be there for, I think, 8 hours,
Hmm.
including, uh, I think that might have excluded lunch. So we could be on set for 8 hours, which during that time we'd get as much schoolwork in as we could because we were also obligated to do 3 hours of schoolwork. If we didn't
Right.
get it in one day, we could make it up on other days when we had less work. So once our 8 hours were up, they had to send us home, but the adults would continue on and do other scenes.
I see.
So a 12-hour day was kind of a union work day, and then they would go into overtime. So they would
Hmm.
try to keep it at 12 hours. And every once in a while on a Friday night, if we had late, night scenes or something like that, I remember doing like a 16-hour day one Friday to get night scenes. But then you
Wow.
had the whole weekend. They had to give you a 12-hour turnaround. So
Hmm.
if they wrapped at 7:30, they couldn't call you in before 7:30 the next morning.
I
Um,
gotcha.
and because we did have children and we didn't work, we typically, that was our, we wrapped. And sometimes when the children were done, if they didn't have other scenes they could do, sometimes it would be less than a 12-hour day. It might be a 10-hour day.
Hmm.
So a lot of
Hmm.
times crew members liked working on our show because we didn't have a ton of locations.
I
And with all the
bet.
kids, they knew that they had a better shot of getting home and seeing their families in the evening.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you in your I guess the schoolroom,
Mhm.
where your tutors were or whatever, were you there with kids from other shows that were also on the lot?
No, it was just our cast. There were
Hmm.
initially six of us in school. We had two teachers, one for the three younger grades and one for those of us who were in high school. And then after John Walmsley was the first to graduate, and then me.
Hmm.
And so when there were four of them, I think they went down to just one teacher.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and then
Interesting.
Eric graduated, and then, the three youngest. I know Cami was, I think trying to remember, she was still in school even when the show ended. She probably was.
Hmm.
So,
What
yeah.
what other shows were shooting on the lot at that time? Do you recall?
Um, when we first got on the lot, I believe Bonanza was shooting next door, or was it? Yeah, I think Bonanza was shooting on the
Wow.
set next to us
Wow.
for some of their interiors. Um, some of the other shows that our company, Lormar, did, like Eight is Enough, filmed there
Hmm.
at some point. I think ER was on the lot at one
Wow.
point. Um, I remember sneaking over and looking at the Poseidon Adventure set at one point because when they weren't filming and the whole upside down boat and wandering around in there going, oh, how cool is
Okay, now
this?
that's cool. That's
That was very
seriously
cool.
cool. Come
Yeah.
on. Did you
Um,
get a chance to wander into a few things? You know?
Sometimes more the exterior sets than the interior. I didn't like to walk on other sound stages because I was never quite sure if it was going to be like I'd get in trouble if I was on a set.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
unless I knew something or someone went, okay, hey, you can come over. But the exterior sets, unless it was like hot set, sign on that they were, which just meant that it was it was ready for shooting, so don't
Right.
touch anything, don't get on the set.
Yeah.
But if it was just a set that wasn't being used, um, we ran all over the place. Like there was New York Street, there was sets that exteriors that were used for Gotham City and some of the Batman stuff,
Wow.
which wasn't shooting at that point, but had. And the Midwest Street that I talk about has like the gazebo that was used in, I think, Music Man and
Oh,
opening of Friends, and then there was a sort of a sort of a Mexican town village thing. And at one point, Cami, we just recently talked. She was kind enough to come on and do a Zoom with me for my
yeah.
YouTube channel, and we were just talking about general things. And I was asking her about her early years and who she was closest to and stuff, and things that I thought the fans might enjoy hearing.
Of
And she
course.
was talking about, because she and David were closest in age, Elizabeth and Jim Bob, she said they used to run all over the place and go on to sets and do pretend shootouts,
Oh.
and rob banks and, just kind of do all that kind of stuff. We had all these amazing sets to play with. I used to go over, and there was a set that used to be on the back lot. The whole back lot's been torn down in parking
Yeah.
lots and office
It's such a
buildings,
shame. Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I used to adore, there was a set that had been used for the castle in Camelot.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and during the time we were on the lot, they totally decorated it up for the movie Lost Horizon, the
Oh,
musical
love
version.
that.
And yeah, and so I used to, when it wasn't being filmed on, I would a lot of times, if I'd go over there and just, if I had some time, just go hang out. They had all these nooks and crannies and stairs, and I just go hang out there. And then they
Oh,
used it in Kung Fu, the series.
yeah, I love,
So
yeah.
it was just used for different shows. And um, so yeah, I would go hang out and check out different sets and go through saloon doors and see what was inside
That's
places.
so fun. I mean, I'm sorry, that's a blast.
Totally, so cool, such fun.
Jeez. So you mentioned earlier that you were over there on the Poseidon set, and another
Yeah.
little thing that I read, and granted, sometimes I actually like to just throw them out there because I like to know, is it true?
Uh-huh.
But there was one where it said that Sheila Allen, who played the telephone operator, and I was going to say the episode is the Vigil, but I could be wrong. And
She
if
was
I
in
am,
several episodes as
yes,
Fanny
okay.
Tatum. Yeah. So
Okay, good. I
yeah,
feel better about that.
yeah,
But here she's Irwin Allen's wife, which is
yeah,
ironic because obviously the Poseidon Adventure.
yeah. I did not know that at the time.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah. So I don't know if he ever came onto set. I don't know that I would have recognized him if he did.
Yeah, right, right. He has
Every
that
once in a
name.
while, people would like, also like Dukes of Hazzard filmed on the lot, and so
Mhm.
oftentimes we were on the back lot at the same time. So sometimes they would drive the General Lee
Oh, that's
through our
cool.
front yard just for fun.
Yeah.
Uh, so I knew all those guys, and I didn't run across them, but Fantasy Island would shoot there on the back lot sometimes. It was one of the locations that they
Oh,
used.
oh,
So
wow.
sometimes the pond would be set up for something for Fantasy Island or whatever. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. That's so cool that you were
Yeah.
there during that
Yeah.
time. I mean, I'm a total television geek. So when I hear that, I'm like, that's too cool.
Yeah.
So okay, so you're what is your if there is, by the way, I think it's really hard. You were there 9 seasons, but what is one of your favorite episodes?
Oh man. I used to say it was the burnout when the house burned down because it
Huh.
was one of the really memorable ones to me. I remember that Friday night when we worked late and there were like all these like visitors on the set. I mean, we had an open set anyway. The tour buses would bring their people. It was a much
Yeah.
smaller tour than like Universal or something like that, but they would bring them in and they would let them
Mhm.
stand and watch us film. Well, this was at night, so it wasn't tours, but I think a lot of people had heard we were going to be shooting this, and so there was like all these extra people out there watching as
Oh,
they
wow.
theoretically burn the house down, or at least set parts of it on fire. So that was memorable to me in terms of filming. But then as I've been watching episodes again in the last couple of years, some of the ones that have really stood out to me are the Easter story when
Mhm.
our mother had polio. And
Yeah.
because there was just all these wonderful, some of the 2-hour ones, because we could interweave so many stories, and that one had, it was like everybody had something to do in that. or The Best Christmas, when another 2 hour when Mama thinks it's going to be the last Christmas when everyone's together, and so she wants to get everybody there, and nothing's going right.
I think I saw that
Um,
one actually. It brings back
yeah,
memories actually
and
as you're
and
saying that to me.
Fanny Tatum, Sheila Allen ends up in
Right.
Drusilla's pond, and her car
Wow.
crashes through the ice, and we have to
Wow.
go rescue her. And um, so some of those, the Firestorm, John Ritter. I mean, come on, talk about
Yeah.
someone to work with, to
Oh
work
wow.
several seasons with John Ritter.
Wow.
Um, that one where they want to burn the German books
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is just a standout for me.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
never heard at least, on my end, I mean, my limited exposure to talking to people with John Ritter, I've never heard a bad thing about the guy.
oh, he was, I mean, he was a wonderful actor. I mean, everyone's so used to him doing comedy, but
Mm-hmm.
he did some wonderful drama work in the Waltons. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and he and Richard were just best buds. You know, they loved working together, and they were a couple of pranksters together. They would be always trying to break each other up. And they were both young. You know, they were in their
Oh,
early
yeah.
20s,
Oh
and so
yeah.
the couple of young guys just trying to one up each other, and but they knew how to shut it off and drop into a dramatic scene at a flash.
Wow.
So uh, there was
You
there was a lot of that. You know, everybody was pretty good at shutting it off and getting flipping the switch and working. When we had to.
That's cool. Do you remember offhand any of the pranks that they pulled on each other?
Well, one of the things that they would do um, is they'd get these like makeup sponges, and
Oh,
and
jeez.
they'd like create they'd chew on them, and so they would create saliva, and so they have like it would look like they were rabid because all this foam would be coming off, falling off
Oh,
their faces and stuff like that, or you
oh
know
my God, that's funny.
yeah, so they do goofy things like that. There were prank. I don't remember a lot of the pranks, but even certain sometimes the crew was involved in pulling pranks
Yeah.
as well. There was a time when before we were in the kitchen, and before they called Richard in for the scene, everybody drew a mole somewhere on their face, and
Oh my God, that is so
cast, crew,
funny.
everybody, and Richard kind of came in, and it's like he did this complete double take, and then he has a great sense of humor, so you could pull those kinds of things with him.
I'm
Or one
sorry,
time
that's really
somebody
funny. That's a great one.
at one point he had a dressing room on the set. There were some dressing rooms literally on the soundstage, and they were small, and one of the crew had found this like big huge stuffed moose that was on a roller and rolled it into his dressing room, so that when he went to open the door, this big huge giant door size moose.
I love stuff like that. I'm
So
sorry. That's
we'd
great.
hide peas in the mashed potatoes, and we didn't have
Oh,
any major food fights, but we would definitely mess around with the food.
oh, that is so funny. I love it. So Michael Leonard, by the way, leaves the show. And was it like well, she was there a long time, but I want to say it was like the eighth season, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you recall? Was that kind of a bit of a blow?
Well, we'd already lost Richard.
Right.
So we lost him after 5 seasons. We knew we knew he was going, at the end of the fifth season. And
Oh, you did know. You knew ahead of
yeah,
time.
yeah, we knew in the fifth season that it was going to be his last season. He'd signed a 5-year contract, and he honored the 5-year contract, but he wanted to, move on to other acting challenges. He was still really young, and, he figured he'd done what he could do with John Boy and move on.
Yeah.
So that was very sad to see him go. Um, and then Michael was there for, I think, another 2 seasons before she left to go do her next series, Nurse,
Hmm.
filmed in New York. Yeah, I mean, every time somebody left, it was sad. We were just such an ensemble that we missed them on the set, missed doing scenes with them. Um, the dynamics of the show started to change because we were all growing up.
Hmm.
uh, I mean, I much as it was fun to have storylines where I got married and then had a kid, but it was like I got married and then I wasn't in the house, which was a drag because then I wasn't around that. I'm like,
Right.
wait a minute, I need to get back in the house.
You're right. You're right. Yeah.
Otherwise, they needed to write something specific for, I might drop by for a scene or two. I'm like, I have nothing to do. Come on, come on.
Right.
So when Kurt went off to Pearl Harbor, or went off, it went into the army, I got to move back to the house.
Right, right. You're like, see ya.
Yay!
That's really funny.
I know. We have
Wow.
different priorities on and off set.
Oh my God, that's classic. So, okay, so the show ends. Well, first of all, how far in advance did you know that this is it?
We didn't.
I had a funny feeling you were going to
Yeah.
say that.
So,
So
yeah, we
common.
were not told. Now, it's possible that you could consider that the last episode we did, the Revel, which had kind of a celebration, sort of a party,
Uh-huh.
that maybe it was suspected that that would be the last season. But the year before, we had done a decade of the Waltons. Uh, so I don't know. It wasn't really like it wasn't our 10th season or anything like that, but
Right. Right.
they did that, and I wondered if there was some thought that, well, that might be the last episode to end with this whole thing with us talking about the show and showing clips, but it wasn't. We did another season, um, and then we didn't know. I mean, literally between seasons, that we kind of got the word that the show wasn't being picked up. Um, so there was no specific. I mean, I heard it through the grapevine.
Oh my gosh, you're
It
kidding.
wasn't like somebody called and told us. It was just, I think I may have heard it through the entertainment grapevine.
Oh my gosh, isn't that app? I mean, for somebody in the outside like myself, hearing that is almost unbelievable. It's like you're the one of the stars of the show. Nobody picks up the phone and says, "Hey, by the way, Judy, we're not going to be." I mean,
Yeah.
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a little odd, and it was hard to process, really. I had
Hmm.
very mixed feelings because I knew that you're in a sort of a limbo when you're doing a series, because for us, we worked 9 months out of the year.
Yeah, yeah,
We did, nowadays, I mean, shows are lucky to do 10, 12, 13 episodes in
that's
a
right.
season, but we were doing like 22 to 26.
Wow.
So it was most of your year, and I knew that at some point, I mean, I started as a teenager. At some point, I was going to have to figure out, the next step in my life.
Sure.
And I knew that as long as the series was going, I couldn't really figure out what that was going to be, if I was going to continue acting or not, or what I was going to do. So I felt like I was sort of sitting in this limbo
Yeah,
until the show ended. So a part of me was like, okay, good. Now I can figure out the next phase of my life.
sure.
But the other part of me was like really sad, because here was this incredible ensemble and this show that I had been a part of my life for 10, 11 years now. So
Kind of an
sad to
actor's
think.
dream. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, there are many actors out there that wish they could have been on a show for nine seasons like yourself. So that is a gift, but it's just
Yeah.
crazy to me that they would end like that. Another thing I had read, and please, if you would just tell me if this is true or not, that the studio never quite appreciated the kids. Is that true or not?
It's hard to say. It felt to us like they didn't appreciate us as much as we would like. We
Yeah.
always wondered how much of that was negotiating tactics.
Mm.
Um, because we would hear things like, well, they're replaceable. If they don't want to take this offer, then we'll just replace them.
Oh
So
boy.
scare tactics, to sort of, um, so, but it was from the perspective of being a teenager and seeing the way the difference between how the grown-ups were treated and how the kids were treated.
Right.
Just we were expected to do the same job,
Hmm.
be prepared, be ready, all the responsibilities of that, maybe not always as many hours until we turned 18,
Right.
but we weren't necessarily, like, early on, they didn't want to give us certain things that were really union rules, like, every working actor is supposed to have a chair
Hmm.
on the set, and our parents would be like, well, they don't have chairs, and they're like, well, they're in school. If they're not on the set, they don't need chairs.
Unbelievable.
Their moms will just sit in them. And it would be like, well, where are our moms supposed to sit, on the ground?
Oh
You
my
know?
gosh, is that
I mean, there'd
bizarre?
just be like, and it wasn't everybody. It was just, we would hear certain things, and there were there was like one particular person that we had to interact with who had that was sort of the relay point. And so he got labeled as the bad guy, you know.
Right, right,
We weren't awfully fond of him, you know. It was not one of our key producers. It never was from Earl Hamner, our creator.
right.
And I didn't really have much of a relationship with some of the other, you know, like our executive producers and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So it was impossible to know who was saying what. So you could just form this opinion about that. But it was a little like we got this sense of this attitude, like the kids need to just be quiet and do their job and not cause trouble and, you know, get on with it. And
Isn't
yes,
it?
as I
Wow.
said, we could be naughty at times. We were kids, and
You're kids.
we could
Yeah.
be, you know, assertive at times. I know I went through a really rebellious kind of troublemaking
Oh,
where
I
I
am
wanted to disagree with
sure.
everything. So I get how, you know, there were times where they were like, oh, would they just behave and do the job?
Yeah.
Uh, so then it could feel, you could get this adversarial sort of thing going on. You know, but it was a different era.
Yeah, it
Kids were
was.
not particularly at that point in time, you really didn't have shows where the kids were the stars of the show, particularly.
Yeah.
It was usually the parents were the stars and the kids were the supporting. And we were fortunate that we had so much we got to do as kids, how
Mm-hmm.
many storylines we had. Um, and it was a new company. We were the first show they did.
Lorimar for
Yeah,
Lorimar? Oh,
yeah,
I did not know that.
yeah.
Huh.
So I always figured they were using the profits they were making on our show to bankroll their other shows.
Literally, they did a
Because
ton.
we'd hear, you know, like that the actors going into the, you know, another show. I mean, especially for us kids, we'd be like, wow, they're getting paid more than us. We're like 5, 6 years into a series, and they're getting paid more in their first year than we're getting
Yeah.
paid. That doesn't seem fair. You
Yeah,
know?
something's a little off.
So you can
Yeah.
get into that sort of, well, that's not fair. How come they're getting treated better than we are? Yeah.
Did you work as, like the cast of Friends, they all got together and it was like it's all being negotiated, all six of us or whatever. Was that the case with the Waltons kids?
Yeah, for the 6 children,
Yes.
we did work on a favored nations.
Okay.
So whatever was negotiated for the kids, you know, was something that we all that was so there was nothing amongst any of us to say, well, why is that person worth more than I am? So there was, you know, the high, which made sense.
Mhm.
I mean, Richard was a star,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then Ralph and Michael were, you know, the next layer of stars, and then
Right.
Will and Ellen were, and but I remember working with some other actors. Like I worked with Larry Linville on a theater production
Oh,
for
yeah.
MASH,
Oh, of
and he
course.
talked about the same thing on MASH. He said, you know, that there were the stars and then the rest of them who in his opinion got paid peanuts. So
Wow.
it's all relative,
Yeah.
you know, and you can feel, well, why aren't I, you know, it's like, well, I wasn't the star of the show. You know.
Yeah. I guess you got to look back and be thankful for everything you did get. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
By regular standards, as a kid, to be making any kind of a
Oh, come
paycheck
on.
that wasn't minimum wage was amazing.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
and I kind of in some ways I think it was good from the standpoint that it kept us real, kept us humble.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, none of us retired off of that.
Hmm.
You know, it was a different era, so I'm sure athletes feel the same way
Oh,
when they look at
sure.
some of the contract things now. And you know, it just meant that, all right, the show's over. I can't just retire. I need to figure out my life. You
And
know,
maybe that's a good thing.
and
Maybe that's what
I think it
motivates you.
is at that
Yeah.
age,
Yeah.
because I think some of the things that some of the sad stories we hear about young performers not
Too
doing well,
many.
I think sometimes there is perhaps excess that plays into that. I don't know. I'm just
Hmm.
speculating, but
Right.
you know, we didn't, you know, I didn't have enough money to get in that much trouble.
Yeah. Hey, I think that's so
That's
terrific. I
good.
really
That's not a
do.
bad thing.
Yeah. So, we've talked a lot about the Waltons, and I'm thrilled we did. By the way, there's just some great stuff there. But I think it wouldn't do you justice to not talk about some of the, because you are extremely athletic. I mean, you did Battle of the Network Stars, Circus of the Stars, all these different things. And I'm looking through it. I'm like, my gosh, what what type of athletics don't you do? I mean, I saw on Circus of the Stars that you did trapeze. I'm sorry, that is scary in itself, just going up there. What, how can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, how did they train you for that? How the heck did you do that?
Oh man. I think I agreed to do that because it scared me and I wanted to kind of work to overcome that. I'm not a real big fan of heights.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, let me see if I can get past that. I got through it. I don't think I got past it.
Did you make
It
the drop, like have to like fall to that
Oh
net?
yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean it was terrifying. It was 12 weeks of training,
Wow.
um, 5 or 6 days a week for like a couple hours a day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because you have to build up that enough strength and the skill to do that. And I would look at that was another case. If I would look at, I remember somebody, one of the other celebrities who came in it because there was a training compound sort of in the backyard of the guy who was the catcher
Yeah.
for our trapeze, Bob Yerkes. He had a trapeze in his backyard. He had a high wire. He had various different things in his backyard, which was where we'd go and train.
Oh
And
my
sometimes
gosh.
somebody would show up to do some. Somebody showed up to do something where he was going to like swing on a rope through and break some hoop and talk to some dogs. He came out once, and I think that was a favored nations show. And I went, now wait a minute, I'm doing 12 weeks, 2 hours a day, and he swings on through there once. I picked the wrong stunt.
Right.
But then I wasn't offered. I was offered either um, high wire or flying trapeze. Why I thought that trapeze would be less
Wow.
scary than high wire, I have no idea.
Did you do the full, like they go back and forth and then sometimes they just turn and you're the other guy catches you, but then there's also the one where you do a somersault and then you get caught. What did you do? Either one scares the heck
I
out of me,
did
but
do a layout somersault to the catcher.
wow.
Yeah, and then I did another one that was a little bit easier, where you're kind of upside down and upside down into as much of a split as you can do, and then when you can see the catcher and you kind of let go and when he's right there. But yeah, the layout is kind of a you don't see him until you actually get your head around there and you hope he's there.
Oh my gosh, you must have been so proud of yourself. I am
Oh
sorry.
yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, so it was, yeah, but I was not sorry to some sports that I have done for shows or for events or whatever. I have continued to do, but
Yeah.
trapeze, it was like happy to hang up the trapeze.
Believe it. So I like to give everybody a chance that's on the podcast to kind of say like, what they're doing now, and please that from any angle, whether it be like charitable wise, or I know you're doing your YouTube episodes where you comment on the past Walton's episodes. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay.
Whatever angle you want to go from.
Great. Well, yeah, during COVID, I decided, since I had extra time and just wanted to try and connect with people. We have wonderful, wonderful, loyal fans of the Waltons who've been
Very.
continue to watch now 50 years later. So I saw that Cami Kotler had been doing some episodes talking about what she remembered about filming, and I went, oh, what a cool idea. I could do
Mhm.
something like that. So I started this behind the scenes of the Waltons thing where I'll talk about different episodes, things I remember, things that stand out to me as I rewatch the episode. And so I've been doing that for a couple years, and I'll do it a little while longer. I'm not going to do it forever, so people need
Mhm.
to check it out now, just in case it goes away. This is a limited offer.
Hear that,
Um,
everyone out there?
yes. And then I started, people would in the comments, and I try to read everybody's comments and at
Mhm.
least, respond in some way, even if it's like, thank you. uh,
Sure.
People would ask questions. And so then I started doing these segments called Ask Judy, and where I would literally take, well, Joe asked blah, 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 and I will answer the
Mhm.
question. So I started doing those segments as part of it also. So if people are interested in seeing some of that stuff, there are spoilers about the house not being real and things
Oh
like
yeah.
that. Sometimes people are like, oh, I wish I didn't know that. It's like, so beware.
That's good to
Buyer
know.
beware. There are
Yeah.
spoilers. Uh,
Yeah.
And if you just look up Judy Norton channel on YouTube, you're bound to find me. And I post every Monday and Thursday an episode.
Wow, I'm impressed, Judy. Being in this business with the podcast, I know that is no small task that you do that.
No, yes, true. So yes, I have to laugh when people, because I just did this week. I just put up one where Cammie Kotler and I sat and did a Zoom like this, and then my editor, and then my editor put it together, and
Yeah.
So I have somebody who helps me with the editing. Actually, my son does it. He's really good at it.
Wonderful.
And and we use visuals from the series to highlight what I'm talking about. But then someone go, oh, I wish you'd have more of the cast on and get the cast together. It's like people have no clue how much work it is. I mean, it took me months to coordinate with Cammie to pick a time that worked for her and worked for me, and then the amount of time it takes with these segments. Imagine if you had to edit this down to like 10 minutes.
Oh no, I really get it, Judy.
With visuals.
Yes.
So it's like, and then sometimes, someone's the audio wasn't good, and I feel for my editor then having to try and make it work out the best as possible. So to try and coordinate people, it's like I just have to laugh and go, I'm sorry, but it's really not going to happen.
I know.
Nor am I going to call in that many favors, because it's it's a lot to ask other people to show up and do that. So
it is.
But I appreciate that they're interested and they think it's so simple. It's like when they find out it took 6.5 days to film an episode. Why did it take so long? It's like, oh,
right. Yeah.
I'm explaining a lot of that in my behind the scenes, why it takes so long and how many takes and how come, how many times you have to turn around and how many takes. And so anyway, so I'm doing that. And then I'm just finishing post-production on a short film that I wrote and directed during COVID. Which will probably end up streaming. It was something to do during COVID, so I got together a group of actors that are part of a writers group I'm in, and just said, hey, let's shoot something. So we spent a couple days shooting this thing, a little just kind of fun sci-fi thing. A bunch of people in little pods heading to other planets and their little journeys along the way, and everybody's little, self-exploration as they take this long journey.
Where can people see that? Hopefully, I mean, what's the ultimate?
I will probably I'll post something probably and let people know through my YouTube and whatnot. I expect it'll end up just simple, like streaming on YouTube or something.
Yeah, sure.
When it's out, and I'll post it on my social media. And
okay, good to know.
And then there's always projects I'm kind of in the works, things I'm writing, because I got into also writing and directing. So there was, things that were supposed to happen and COVID preempted them. So whether they get back,
for many of us,
who knows? So, and then I'm just spending time, a certain amount of time when I have free time, to goofing off.
I think that's a very good idea for all of us. Yeah, I like that. Well, listen, I really appreciate you very much. I enjoyed talking with you thoroughly, and thanks for being as in depth as you were too. I think the fans will love it. I know I did. So, but I look forward to seeing any more of your work and things like that. And I will certainly check out the Judy Norton channel and see some of that. I'm intrigued as can be right now. So, anyway, just thanks a bunch. I wish you all the best on everything you do.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button in the corner of the video so that you don't miss any of our future YouTube podcasts. Also, follow us on iTunes and Spotify and leave us a review.